Hey guys, it's a Carvin MTS 3200. I know literally nothing about these amps. I know Carvin from obviously the day, I think the first time I came across the name Carvin was turning the page and seeing a Steve Vai ad in a Guitar Player magazine back in, must have been the 80s, right? X100Bs, and I thought, well, if Steve Vai's playing them, that must be alright. This amp was sent to me by a guy. He says that the pots are seizing up, the gain channel is crackly, and what can we do to kind of make the gain channel sound a bit sweeter? I think it sounds, from what he's telling me, it sounds a bit raspy. I haven't even turned it on yet. Literally just put it on the bench. Let's take it apart and see what we've got. Well, I've got this thing out of the head cap. First thing I noticed is that it's got a reverb tank in the head cap itself, right? So we've got an arrangement here where this thing is tethered to a reverb tank which is built into the head cap. That's cool. My guess is, I haven't looked at the schematic for this yet. I know there is one online. I found it. I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet. My guess is that's probably a tube-driven reverb tank. These are Sovtek 5881s in the power section, which is cool. Good tubes. I don't know the condition of these yet. They kind of look okay, but we will see. I can't see a choke, so maybe there's one mounted on the inside. Let's flip it over and have a look. Okay, now we've flipped it over. I cannot see a choke, and what I can see is a big cement resistor here kind of hanging around where the mains and screens and like all of the supply nodes look to be filtered through here. My guess is that what we've got is it's just a simple resistor sitting in there between the plates and screens. I can see screen resistors to the power tube sitting up here. They all look a bit yellow, like they've had a bit of heat on them, but that's kind of, I guess, to be expected given that this is not a brand new amp. It's all PCB mounted, right? So the pots, which are tucked in behind this part of the chassis here, it's powder coated chassis. Very kind of, it's like a Soldano, I guess, in that regard. Well, we've got the amp powered on, and what I'm just checking for, usual thing on the first power up, is that we've got the heaters all working. It's in standby, so just letting the heaters kind of warm up. We'll see where we get to. What I'll do is I've got the amp, everything on 0, right? So it's kind of, all the volumes are down. I'll bring it out of standby and we'll see if we can get a plate voltage on this thing. Okay. Powder coated chassis, so not the easiest thing to get a ground reference on. So I've got the meter, the ground on the meter. You can see this green alligator clip here, just on the chassis ground. As it is, this looks like pin number 3 here. What do we got? 435 plate voltage, volts DC. So 430 for 435 for 100 watt. It's not the highest. It's kind of okay. That's, got me nice kind of compressed kind of, power stage there. It's not, it's not 500, that's for sure. But at 430, that's not too bad. Let's have a look at the bias voltage, pin 5. Right, on the power tube, right, so minus 36 volts. I cannot see any evidence of 1 ohm resistors in here to measure bias. I could be wrong. I do need to check the schematic, as I said. I'll do that next. I've got a bias probe, so I can do that, I can do that the old-fashioned way. And let's have a look at the screen voltage, 429. So we're getting a drop from the plates to the screens, which is what I'd expect. So from here, what I'll do is I'll plug the amp into, I've got a 2x12 speaker cab over here. I'll be checking for kind of hum, just, that it's kind of behaving itself at idle, and kind of run through the pots, turn them all back and forward and see whether there's any kind of scratchiness in there. The customer did say that there was some scratchiness in the drive channel. Let's see what that's about. If that all checks out, we'll take it in and give it a blast and see how this thing actually sounds. All right, so we've got the Carvin plugged into my 2x12 speaker cab here, and we're about to do the first, tone test, right? Power it on. I've got the volumes on 0. I've got everything else at midday, except for the reverb, right? The reverb is off completely, and the reverb is powered by V4. So I've had a quick look at the schematic, right? So V123 is preamp, so clean and dirty channels. V4 is driving the reverb. V5 obviously phase inverter. So let's turn this baby on and see what we've got. Okay, so I'm still on standby, and I can see we've got nice little LEDs on the front. That's handy. There's a channel switch here. Got a bit of switch bounce actually. Not a major problem, but bring it out of standby, see what happens. Okay, I don't know whether you can hear that on the camera, but to me, that is more hum than I would want from a tube amp. Certainly one of my own builds, one of my head first amps, I would not ship it with hum like that. It's not terrible, but it's there. And the volumes are on 0, right? So it's not from the preamp. This is something in the power stage here. It's certainly not coupling between the PT and the output transformer. They're too far away. Right? Sometimes if you see builds where the output transformer and the power transformer are close together, you get magnetic EMI happening, and you can hear the whether you're 50 hertz or 60 hertz, depending on what part of the world you're in, with a push-pull amplifier, right? Which almost all modern amps are. So if it's not single-ended, there are some classic early Fender designs that are single-ended, and other amps. Most amps are push-pull, right? And which is why bias is really important, because if it's a 50 watt, you'll have 200 watt 4. They go in pairs, and if one of those tubes is way out, or a couple of them are, and your bias between the two sets is out, you'll get hum. A little bit of variation is okay, right? But if it's significant, you'll get hum, because the push-pull operation actually cancels the hum. It's a big part of it, right? So I definitely need to look into that. I'll use my bias probe, and I'll check the bias on every single one of these, and we'll see what we're getting. In the meantime, let's have a listen to the channels. So we're on the clean channel. I've got everything at midday, and
nice and clean. It's like the tone controls at midday, quite sterile. Quite MIDI. But you can EQ it. So if I bring the bass up, take a little bit of mids out, maybe treble still at midday. It starts to sweeten up. Not bad. I think you can pull an okay clean sound out of that channel. Right, let's move over to the dirty, or the lead channel as it's called on this amp, and let's see what we've got. I've got the drive at midday, the volume is down. I'll go to the humbucker, bring it up. Oh. Oh wow. Okay. I don't know how to describe that other than sounds like a really sick fuzz. There's no volume, right? I've got the volume there up at 4 of 10. This is a 100 watt amp. It should be absolutely cranking. There's nothing there. And the drive, so I move the drive, it's scratchy. Right? In fact, if I move it, I can hear that. It makes me think there's DC on that pot. Maybe a coupling cap has gone. We'll see. But yeah, or maybe it's one of the preamp tubes has gone, I don't know, but that is shocking. Wow, no wonder he said that the drive channel had a problem. It certainly does. So, two things here that I can see, right? The hum at idle, and the volume's down. The hum at idle's, I'd love to make that better. We'll check the bias on the tubes, power tubes. Drive channel needs some love. Okay, so let's check the bias on each of these power tubes, right? We'll start here and we'll progress through. Now, I just checked my calcs here. These are 5881s, and at 435 volts plate voltage, we'd want the bias current to be just shy of 40 milliamps. Like 40, would be up at nearly, close to 70% dissipation. So, let's see what we've got. Right, let's come out of standby. Right, so 48 and a half. She's running hot too. That's, yeah. So it's running, and it's biased too hot, that's for sure. What I'll just check for, I'm not going to adjust the bias just yet. I'm just going to go through every tube and see what kind of variation we've got from one to the next. Right, so 48, let's call it 48 and a half for the first one. And over to the second power tube, coming out of standby now. Just warming up. Whoa, that's okay. It's a long way out of range. It's a long way from the first one we checked. Right, let's see what the next one has in store for us. And let's move to number 3. Right, warming up. So it looks like kind of somewhere in the middle between the two. Right, so we might have a bit of variation back and forward here, but the key thing is that the pairs, right, between the two pairs, that they're matched. And last but not least, number 4. Let's bring it on. So, and clearly the amp as a whole is biased way too hot. And I have noticed on the amp, I had a quick look at the schematic, there is a switch on the rear of the amp that flicks between EL34s and 5881s. I'm going to check that because this makes me suspect that it's on the wrong setting. Okay, well, sure enough, the bias switch on the rear of this amp, right, it's got an EL34 or a 5881 bias setting, and which will be changing the the drop-in resistor on the bias supply, so you can get like a coarse selection which you can then fine-tune with the bias pot internally. It was set to EL34s, and I flicked it across, and I'll show you what happens, right? So let's power this on again. I haven't even adjusted the bias pot. I've just flicked it across to 5881s, which is what's in this amp. Bring it out of standby. Remember what I said, we're looking for something, you know, approaching 40, less than 40 ideally was how I would bias it. So, you know, 35, let's call it 36. It's conservative, but you know, probably okay. I'm sure the plate voltage, I haven't measured the plate voltage, obviously I've got the amp around the right way at the moment. The plate voltage would have lifted a bit because there's less current draw at idle, so we'll recheck all of that, but this will be a happier amp now. And I will plug it into the speaker cab just to check the hum at idle, because with the bias coming back to a more comfortable level, I suspect that will reduce some of that hum. Okay, so we've got an issue in the lead channel of this Carvin, and so in reference to the oscilloscope video, which I've already posted on the channel, I'm going to trace the signal through this amp, and we're going to see whether we can pinpoint where in the circuit that the lead channel is going astray, right? So luckily this Carvin MTS 3200 Master Tube Series schematic is freely available on the internet if you search for it. Right, so I'm just going to basically trace through this on the lead channel, and I will look to put the probe after each coupling cap in the gain stage, right? So I just want to see, you know, this signal trace through the various gain stages. This is, you know, in reference to the schematic. It's first triode on the lead channel, then it's the gain pot. Second triode, there's some Zener diode clipping after the second gain stage, second triode, into the third triode, and then a plate fed tone stack. Okay, bass, middle, treble. Then, you know, kind of a recovery stage, I would call it, another gain stage. So we're now 1, 2, 3, fourth gain stage, and into the volume control for the lead channel. From there, it goes into a relay, which is selecting between channel 1, channel 2, off to the effects loop and reverb driver. So the first thing I'm going to look at is after the first gain stage, which is C2. So let's turn the amp on. I've got my scope set up at my 150 milliamp input sine wave at 1 kilohertz. It's, you know, pretty much all you need to do this kind of testing. Let's go to the probe. My probe is not connected to anything at the moment, so let's get the amp going. Turn it on. I'll bring it out of standby. So C2 is this blue, let's move that out the way so you can see it on the video. It's this blue coupling cap here. Alright, so this side of that capacitor, there will be, you know, very high voltage DC. The other side, the DC will be blocked. Well, should be blocked. And we should have the first gain stage. And you can see on the scope already, I've got what looks like a pretty clean sine wave, and if I go to measure, I'm at 17 volts peak to peak from the first triode. That looks good, clean as, alright, not any drama there. That goes to the first gain pot, well, not the first gain pot, the drive channel gain pot. From there we're going into the second triode, which is V1A, and it is, you can see on the schematic there, right, C14 is the other side of the coupling cap. Now C14 I can't actually get to. You can see it is a little box capacitor here. There's no way I can clip this on here. What I can do is I can put the probe on the grid of the valve here, right? So whenever you've got these, you know, quite often, right, when you've got these mounted up the other way like this, these PCB mounted sockets, A might be this side, B might be this side. So if I'm looking at this, I'm tipping that these are the 4 Zener diodes in reference to the schematic. That's the C14 coupling cap, and they're probably coming into the grid here. So let's call that, it's probably V2B is my guess. So we'll come out of here. Now bear in mind that by this stage this thing's now had these Zener diodes applied to it, right? So I'd expect the thing to be pretty square, and there it is, right? So let me just bring this up. There is a Zener clipping right there, pretty early in the circuit compared to the Jose, right? Jose clipping, you know, right at the right before the tone stack, after the cathode follower, and a classic Marshall. This is pretty early on. This is, we're only after the second gain stage here, so someone couldn't help themselves. So that looks kind of okay. So I would say that V1, so we've got 2 gain stages there, V1B and V1A, that all looks fine. So let's go to V2. Now this is the gain stage, V2B is the gain stage that's driving the tone stack, plate fed, and C16 is the coupling cap that I'm looking for, and I can see it there. And again, I'll go to the far side because that'll be where there's no DC. Now that looks okay as well. Right, that looks okay. So what do we had? I mean, it's, you know, we had 4 volts peak to peak going in. We got 50 something volt, 55 volts peak to peak coming out of that triode. That kind of looks okay. From there we go through the tone stack and into V2A, and it's C25. which is the coupling cap after that gain stage. Now C25 is this brown one here. From here we go to the master volume. So let's get on this side of C25, and that looks really sick. The shape of the wave is kind of okay. I mean, but at 3.4 volts peak to peak, something's not right there. We've only driven through, you know, would it be 55 something volts peak to peak at the beginning of that tone stack. Now, I know we get a bit of signal loss through there, but that's not what you'd expect, particularly as there's a triode there that's just, you know, amplified this thing by a gain factor of, you know, 50 or 60. Something wrong there. Right, so what you can do from here is start mucking around and measuring all these components and so on, and try and find out what's going on between these two gain stages. The simplest thing to try is to replace the tube. Believe me, so many times I've chased my tail trying to diagnose something like this, only to find at the end it was just a bad tube. So this is V2, right? We had V2B was kind of, you know, looked good. V2A, this is not what we're expecting. So I'm going to power it down. I'm going to put a new 12AX7 into V2. I won't change any controls on the amp. Let's see what we get. So we're at 3.7 volts peak to peak here. Okay, well, I've replaced V2 as I just mentioned. Everything's the same. Probe's in the same place. I haven't touched anything with respect to where the gain pot is set, and we had 3.7 after that coupling cap last time we powered the amp on. So let's bring it on. That's the power, and I'll just take it out of standby. Whoa. Okay, cool. Right, let's bring this down. Oh, look at that. Alright, okay. A little bit of interference there. Look, it could just be the probe. It doesn't have very good ground or something, but we went from 3.7 volts there to 65 peak to peak. So, interesting, right? Tubes. Imperfect things. And always worth remembering that there's two triodes in a tube. So with that V2, with the problem we had with that tube, one side of it was working fine, but the other not so much. Now what I would hope for now is that when I plug the old guitar into this and recheck that gain channel, we've got something a bit more respectable. Let's try it. Okay, well, we've got the amp now plugged back into my Turbo 12 cab over there. I've got my trusty Sir Classic S. It's into the front of the amp. I'm on the gain channel, and the amp is already on. And I'm going to bring up the volume. And remember what the gain channel sounded like before. It was very sick. So immediately I've got volume. Like, hardly cracked that volume. And I mean, that's not super loud, but it's, yeah. I think the gain channel's fixed. What I'll do, I'm going to take this inside into the studio space, and we'll see if we can drag a decent tone out of it. Well, I brought the Carvin into the studio here. I've got it hooked up to my Sir reactive load. I'm running a IR in the Axe effects. Nothing else going on. There's nothing in front of the amp or whatever, right? So this is my normal setup. Let's take this out of standby. I'm on the gain channel, and I've got everything kind of pretty much at midday here. Although, let me just make sure it is. It's not. Here we go, at midday. I've got the gain at midday, bass, mid, treble. Volume is down. This presence control, which is not actually a presence. If you look at the schematic, I might flick it up and show you this on the screen now. It's actually just a low pass filter in the preamp. Presence controls normally are in the power stage, right? Power amp section. So anyway, not to worry. Quite bassy. That's the Xena diodes will be doing a lot of that. Let's bring the bass back a bit. I'll bring the mids up. A bit more treble here. Let's see how this sounds, and the gain's still at midday. The gain up to 1 PM there. I'm going to bring in this Lexicon PCM80, which I've got on the rack, so just bear with me while I bring that in. Here we go. Bit more spread now. I don't know much about these amps, as I said in the beginning of the clip. I can hear that kind of 80s kind of Jose thing going on. It's the Xenas. Quite bassy. I've got that bass right back at kind of, you know, what is that, 9 o'clock now. And if I bring the drive up, that's now kind of 1:30ish. Starting to get a bit buzzy. Bring it back a bit. So that's quite acceptable. Helps if I bring the volume up on the guitar. Sorry about that. It's a Carvin MTS 3200 Master Tube Series. Came in for a service and a repair. Quite a simple one in the end. It's an okay sounding amp. Look, you know, does its thing. It's of its era. Not bad at all. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Tune in next time. Catch you later.